Imagine this with me. A battery that could last for more than 5,000 years without ever running out of charge. A battery so powerful, it could keep working long after you're gone, after your kids, and even after the grandkids of your grandkids. And here's the craziest part. Nuclear batteries like this were actually tested decades ago. Back in the 60s, they were already running in scientific stations and even on space probes. And guess what? Some of them are still running today. Now think about this. One single source of energy that could keep working for hundreds of years without ever needing a recharge. Could that be the future of our devices? Could we really get to the point where your phone or even a drone could run for decades straight without stopping for a second? That's exactly what we're going to answer in today's episode. So if you like this kind of content, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe so you'll always catch what's coming next. Picture a future where your devices never ever lose their charge. A future that might actually come true thanks to tiny nuclear batteries. Batteries that don't just outlive you, they could outlive your children and their children too. One single battery lasting centuries without ever being recharged. Sounds like pure science fiction, right? Well, it's not. This is the strange, fascinating world of nuclear batteries. For decades, these batteries stayed hidden, tucked away far from public view. They were only used in space missions and extreme scientific projects. But now, things are changing. If you've ever wished your device could run forever, or wondered how satellites, spacecrafts, and drones could keep going in the future, this episode is made for you. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on nuclear batteries, their origins, their breakthroughs, and the future that could totally reshape how humanity thinks about energy. Nuclear batteries, also known as beta voltaics, have actually been around for decades, but their use was super limited. Back then, they only produced tiny amounts of power, just microwatts at best. That's literally a millionth of a watt, barely enough to power a simple calculator. In China, for example, a company called Beta Volt is experimenting with radioactive nickel isotopes. Their battery has a half-life of about 100 years, which means it could keep producing power for a century. But its output, just about 100 microwatts. Enough for, a calculator. In the US, a company called City Labs developed batteries using tritium, a radioactive form of hydrogen with a 12-year half-life. They're reliable but still weak, designed for ultra-low power devices. And over in the UK, Arconlight has been working with carbon-14. The result? Batteries that could last 5,000 years. But again, the output is so tiny it's measured in microwatts. The real strength of these batteries wasn't their power, it was their insane longevity. Picture sensors buried deep under Antarctic ice, probes drifting in the emptiness of space, or scientific stations in brutal environments. In those situations, swapping out a battery is impossible. So the only solution? Use one that basically never dies. But outside of those extreme scenarios, nuclear batteries were just a scientific curiosity, not a practical energy source. From microwatts to watts. In recent years, something changed. Companies stopped being satisfied with scraps of nuclear power. Now they're trying to scale it up. One method is called stacking. Instead of relying on one tiny nuclear cell, you stack multiple cells together to boost output. For example, a company called Infinite Power patented a nuclear battery about the size of a cubic meter, producing 3 watts. Sounds small, right? But compared to the earliest generations, that's a massive leap. Betavolt also claims their small cells can be combined, scaling from just a few microwatts all the way up to several watts. That opens new possibilities, like long-lasting sensors, remote communication stations, or even wildlife cameras that could record for decades without ever needing a new battery. What once sounded like fantasy is slowly turning into reality. Nuclear batteries are moving beyond the microwatt stage into a whole new era. Turning heat into power. So if these small batteries are still limited, how do we go bigger? The answer? Don't just capture charged particles directly. Use the one thing radioactive materials are really good at producing: heat. That's exactly how radioisotope thermoelectric generators, or RTGs, work. The concept is genius in its simplicity. You place a radioactive material like plutonium-238 or strontium-90 inside a container, then surround it with thermoelectric materials. The difference between the heat from the radioactive core and the cold environment outside gets converted into electricity. NASA's been using this since the 60s, and it became absolutely essential for deep space missions. The Voyager spacecrafts, the Curiosity rover on Mars, and even New Horizons, all powered by RTGs. These systems can generate hundreds of watts, enough to power instruments, communications, and heating systems on missions lasting decades, way out there where sunlight can't be relied on. The Soviets also used them in remote navigation stations. Some were abandoned, and in isolated regions, people later stumbled across them, trying to use the heat without realizing they were touching something lethally radioactive. Despite the risks, the concept is powerful, and today startups are re-engineering RTGs with safer materials, smaller designs, and higher efficiency. That's why RTGs are now seen as the bridge between tiny nuclear cells and miniature nuclear power stations. Startups and military interest. In recent years, nuclear battery development has broken free from just space agencies and government labs. Now it's in the hands of startups. And that changes everything, because startups move fast, they take risks, and they push technology into real-world applications that big institutions hesitate to touch. And of course, the military is watching closely. Take Xenopower in the US, for example. They patented a new type of compact RTG. Their designs shrink traditional RTGs down while delivering between 10 and 100 watts continuously. They market them for peaceful uses like satellites, underwater stations, or isolated research gear. But let's be real, it's impossible to ignore the military potential. Imagine a drone flying for months without ever needing to recharge. NDB, the so-called nano diamond battery company, have expanded their vision too. Instead of just tiny cells, they're developing medium-sized RTGs producing anywhere from a few watts to tens of kilowatts. They pitch them as solutions for remote communities, space colonies, or even local heating systems. But again, the military interest is obvious. And companies like Howe Industries are experimenting with microreactors, tiny nuclear plants capable of generating anywhere from kilowatts to full megawatts. Whether it's for space colonies, disaster relief, or underground shelters, the line between civilian and military applications is razor thin. The future of nuclear batteries. The future here looks huge and packed with ambition. For decades, nuclear batteries were just an afterthought, powering small sensors, deep space probes, or isolated instruments. The problem was always the same: too little power. But now those limits are breaking down. Companies are scaling from just a few microwatts to practical watts. That unlocks new uses, like monitoring stations, long-term sensors, or even maritime beacons. More importantly, the comeback of RTGs is pushing output into the hundreds of watts, enough to power satellites, undersea vehicles, or long-endurance military drones. And some companies are aiming even higher, developing small nuclear reactors producing full kilowatts or even megawatts. In other words, miniature nuclear power plants. Sure, you won't be charging your phone or running your car on a nuclear battery anytime soon, but that's not really the point. This technology offers something else: power sources that last for decades. Power that doesn't depend on weather, sunlight, or constant refueling. For deep space exploration, ocean science, defense, and remote communities, nuclear batteries could evolve from a scientific curiosity into a backbone of infrastructure. It's not just about convenience, it's about endurance. Power that outlives generations. Energy that doesn't quit. Nuclear batteries could redefine what's possible when electricity itself becomes eternal.